Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2021 Distinguished Alumni Virtual Event, How Our Distinguished Alumni Are Making Their Mark, and the kickoff to our 2021 Homecoming Alumni Weekend. My name is Jessica Mueller. I'm the Associate Director of Alumni Engagement, and thrilled that you could be here with us today. Special thanks to our moderator, Dr. Heather Dalmage, and our distinguished alumnus, Han Zigmund and Bradley Kirouac, for sharing their time and talent with us today. I also want to recognize Mayor Sheila Chalmers-Curran, who is the 2021 Distinguished Alum Awardee for Roosevelt, but couldn't join us here today. Many of us are working towards making positive change in different ways in our community. Some efforts are grassroots, some through policy, financial decisions, creating space for conversations, or some are just small acts of kindness and support. Today, Dr. Heather Dalmage, Professor of Sociology and Director of the Mansfield Institute for Social Justice, will lead our 2020 and 2021 honorees in conversation on how they are making their mark in their communities and the community at large. Welcome, Dr. Heather Dalmage. Dr. Dalmage's area focus include race, whiteness, family education, juvenile justice, and disability. Dalmage is a past Fulbright Scholar at the Center for Critical Research on Race and Identity at the University of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa. She is the author and editor of 4 books, including Vanishing Eden, White Construction of Memory, Meaning, and Identity in a Racially Changing City. Heather has published and presented broadly on race, education, and family. She is a past president of the Society of the Study of Social Problems and is a member of the Illinois Department of Juvenile Justice Board of Education. Thank you for moderating today, and I will now turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jessica, and thanks for all your help in organizing this wonderful panel. So I'm going to continue the introductions, and we'll be introducing our panelists for today. And let me start with Han Zigmund. Hans graduated with his MA in Econ from Roosevelt in 2004, and he's joining us from the state of Alaska, where he is currently. Shortly after leaving Roosevelt, he started working with the state of Illinois, beginning at the Department of Revenue. There he built economic models to forecast state tax revenues. He also worked as an associate director then at the Office of Management and Budget. And he was a leader in something Illinois desperately has needed, and that's pension reforms. And he was working under Patrick Quinn at that point. Then he later he was appointed the chief economist at the Department of Revenue. And then he concluded his time in Illinois, going back to the OMB and serving as the director for Illinois. He focused on all kinds of important social needs while serving in those positions, including some examples here. Let's see here, projects. He helped secure funding for the budget to include critical deferred maintenance at the Ludeman Development Center in South Suburban Park Forest. He helped secure and create funding for the Illinois Department of Corrections for the Joliet Treatment Center and the Coliseum at the Illinois State Fairgrounds in Springfield. He's currently in Alaska serving as the state finance director. And he has been on faculty at Roosevelt University. So welcome my colleague, Han Zigmund. And I'm going to introduce our second panelist today, Bradley Krouac, and then I'm going to turn it over to the two of you leading with some questions that I hope you'll answer for the folks that are joining us today. So Bradley Krouac, he began in the Marines, supporting Marriage Equality Act. He has been recognized for his communal spirit. He was named the Student Leader of the Year, the Benjamin P. Pica Student Leader of the Year at the College of DuPage, and the 30 Under 30 by Windy City Times. all before graduating from Robert Morris College with his bachelor's in business administration in 2016, very recent. He co-hosted Parklandia, an iHeartRadio podcast, and he has also created Hello Ranger podcast and app that's about providing access to underrepresented communities in the travel space. And he developed this alongside his husband. They spent a couple of years traveling, and in that time, he decided he needed to get his feet back on the ground and came to Oklahoma, where he joined Big Brothers Big Sisters, and he now serves as the area director. And like in the past, his past endeavors, he has now been named the second most influential young professional in Oklahoma City by the networking group Oklahoma City Young Professionals. And his work focuses on filling the mentoring gap to combat ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and so that children can be put on a path to be able to achieve what they're best able to achieve in the world. So I welcome our very accomplished and distinguished panelists. And I'm going to give this question, and then I ask that in whatever order, we could start out with Hans, since I introduced you first, if you wouldn't mind answering it, and then we'll move to Bradley. Can you just talk to us about what has been your proudest sort of achievement over the course of working in community and working in government?
Well, first, thank you for the question, and also thank you to Roosevelt University for inviting me to be on this panel today. And I really do appreciate it, and always enjoy these conversations. Obviously, I'm very proud of the time that I spent in the Office of Management and Budget in Illinois, and breaking through the budget impasse to finally strike a deal back in 2018 that Governor Rauner would sign. The budget impasse wasn't good for anyone. The legislature had previously overridden the governor's veto to pass a budget in the previous fiscal year, but I thought it became critical that the administration also be able to pass a budget. And when I was asked to step up as the OMB director after the previous director had to resign for family reasons, and I was excited to do so, but only if I could really help to make a difference there, because there were so many critical needs in the state, mostly in the infrastructure area. And so, but kind of more than just the deal itself was just the fact that I was able to work together with serious policy makers on both sides of the aisle. And we really, everybody in that room put the partisan interest aside and worked toward the common good. And I'm really proud of that, and it's not something that's very common right now. And so that's, I think, why I really think that is the kind of the thing in my professional career that I'm most proud of.
Thank you, Hans. Bradley, same question to you.
Absolutely. I really think that the most proud work that I get to do is every day when I wake up here at Big Brothers Big Sisters, really working with mentors and bringing our community together to serve children that sometimes just need to learn how to show up in a one-on-one setting, because a lot of times they go into school and they're in a group of 30, 40 students in each classroom. And then they go home, but that one-on-one time is more brush your teeth, do your homework, let's go, parenting, because they need that parent to do those things. And so when they actually get that specific one-on-one time away from all responsibility, it really starts to change their life, because they start to learn how to show up for others with purpose and intent. Mm-hmm. And that's part of combating adverse childhood experiences, is learning things like purpose, intent, communication. And these children, they communicate with their bigs now, their parents, and our program specialists once a month for the first year. And we'll also do match activities throughout the year. So they'll come to those, and they'll go learn fishing, and they'll learn how to create fashion, and then do runways and build self-confidence. And they learn all these tools. And due to systemic issues in our society, we don't exactly always afford every citizen that opportunity. When I was at Scissortail Park with 38 of our matches, over 20 of them said that was the first time to our city's park, Scissortail Park, where we did that fishing activity. 50 of them said they'd never went fishing. And in those conversations, there was a couple that never been to a Brahms. A Brahms is just as popular as a McDonald's as everywhere else here in Oklahoma City. And that's where you get an ice cream cone. Because a lot of our kids, they live in 5 square blocks. And so by opening up that one door and showing them what the outside world looks like, and then providing them with a mentor that maybe has achieved college or even just a high school diploma, because a lot of the systemic issues are these parents who haven't had the opportunity to graduate high school because their whole entire family has always gotten pregnant by the age of 14. Or there's many, many different scenarios in that. But just by opening up doors for these children, that's what makes me proudest, because we really get to do that work and we see the changes, and they're dramatic at that. And the last little example that I'll use is we had this little that came in for an interview in our program, and he said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And the thing he says, "Well, after I got out of prison, like my dad, I want to work at a gas station." And we're like, "Well, we can skip the first one, and then we can get you to that gas station. But let's work on avoiding that." And we get to really help change those trajectories. And that was a really real, honest answer for him, which a lot of people don't get, because we all have different privileges in this life. And so by being able to recognize my privilege every single day, coming into work and just helping with these small but super important stepping stones for these children, that's the proudest work I'll ever do. And sorry, they started doing construction above me.
You don't have political enemies, do you?
I hope not.
It is interesting that you're both very reflective on your role in creating something larger than yourself and seeing how you can create good through the work that you're doing. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the path that brought you to the work that you're doing, and that vision. What was the inspiration? The what or the who was the inspiration towards you coming to this space? And how about if we reverse the order this time, since I hear silence by you right now, Bradley? Maybe we can sneak it in.
Yeah, no, honestly, the path that, I've always wanted to serve my country and my community. So when I was a child, I wanted to go into the Marines, and I learned a lot of great things about the Marines and our military and our military members. And there's a lot of adversity and trauma there as well that I've had to combat, and learning about that trauma is different than adverse child experiences, but there's a lot of tools that go hand in hand. So it really started within the Marines. But when I got out, I was like, well, what do I want to do? And I didn't know. So I was also coming out of the closet. So I was coming to terms with my sexuality and what it was. And so I decided I was going to work at this gay bar. Well, this gay bar taught me some really unique lessons, because they would sell like Jello shots for different organizations, and we would all go out and volunteer for different organizations, youth serving, and try to uplift our community. And this bar, of all places, taught me how to build community. So that's really where it started. And then I moved to Illinois because I wanted to be closer to family. And that's when I started at College of DuPage, and I became the sociology president, the Pride Alliance president. And I started to work on fighting for marriage equality. And I talked about my story of serving during Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Talked with Governor Pat Quinn a couple times. And once I was one of the grand marshals, and I walked with him down the aisle for the ceremony, and talked to 26 state representatives, knocked on over 7,000 doors, and did 10,000 phone banks, and I organized others to go. I helped organize 200 people to go to the March on Springfield for marriage equality. And I worked down in like Cicero Berwyn. There's a Project Vita, which is a youth serving organization for Latino, Latinx, queer youth. And I did some project management there, just small things, but I was learning my lessons and getting my groundwork done, and just doing anti-bullying or pro-friendship panels at the Center on Halstead for Friend Movement, who's an LA-based organization. But all these different aspects in life, that's where I got my start. Chicago is where I got my start. College is another place. Like learning about the needs of others by being a servant leader is really where my start came from.
Thanks, Bradley. Hans, can I flip the same question to you?
Sure. I suppose that in some ways we started out very similarly, Brad and I. My journey began in the Navy, and I spent 6 years in the Navy, and then went to the College of Lake County initially after my naval service. When I was at CLC, I think is where I started to have at least a bit of political involvement on the local level in some Lake County elections. Shortly thereafter, I was elected as a Republican precinct committeeman, and that was an enlightening experience into just how policymakers and elected officials really think. I was going to college at Barra College at the time, studying economics. And while I was there, I read a lot of economists. I was reading Paul Krugman, I was reading Milton Friedman, I was reading lots of different economists. But the two of them, and putting aside their obvious philosophical differences, were probably the two authors I was most drawn to. And one thing I recall, and I'll paraphrase this, I remember Krugman saying somewhere that, and maybe this was in a talk he was giving, that every economist should spend a year working in Washington, D.C. so they can see how poorly decisions are made. And I suppose that I could say the same for working in Springfield. And so I kind of indirectly took Paul Krugman's advice after finishing my graduate work at Roosevelt to then go work in state government. And I think that the policymakers really intend, I think, to make good choices. Many of them are very serious about their work. But the truth is that politics are first, analytics are second, and generally only if they confirm the biases of the folks that are making the policy decisions. And so I think that if I learned anything super important along that journey, I think that's it. So, but that was the path at a really, really general level.
Yeah. And then how about the inspiration? What inspired you to move in these directions?
Well, I guess that, there was not a moment of inspiration. It was a very non-linear, looking at the next opportunity, and just kind of following those sort of things. I worked while I was at Roosevelt University. Natalie Davila was one of the faculty members in the economics department, and she had worked previously with the city and the Federal Reserve Bank, and had a lot of similar interests in tax policy economics. And she had gone on to be the chief economist at State of Illinois Department of Revenue, and which is where I ended up working after I graduated. And I think that working with her was inspiring. I think that working some of the research methods courses I took with Kelly Tazumos, who I think is at DePaul now, but she was in the public administration area at the time, and I found it very inspiring to work with her. So those were two of the more inspiring people that I had worked with, certainly in my graduate work at Roosevelt.
Yeah. Thank you. It is interesting because in the way that Bradley is talking about it, we hear sort of inspiration through the process of actually acting in the world. And it sounds like that was the same effect for you. And then it's understanding who these individuals are that help us to get where we are and realize our pathways and all of that. So thank you both for that. And we'll flip the order again on this next question. So can you talk a little bit about, Hans, you graduated from Roosevelt with an MA in Econ, and Bradley, you graduated from Robert Morris, and of course we're one university now. So if you two could talk about how your college experience, Roosevelt University, Robert Morris University, has shaped your perspective on the way you do the work that you do, and the pathways that you've chosen. And we'll start with Hans. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that both as a, as a matter of economics and as a matter of political perspective, my time at Roosevelt helped me to appreciate a diversity of worldviews. It's very easy when I grew up mostly up in Lake County, Illinois, and it was in the military, went back to Lake County, Illinois to go to college, and so and there's a certain worldview that comes with living in Western Lake County. Let's be quite frank about that. And I wasn't all that accepting of other perspectives, and it had more of an opinion of, well, why can't you see the world like I do? And I think that by the time my time at Roosevelt really helped me to see a diversity of perspectives and not only appreciate them, but also allow them to somewhat influence my own worldviews. And so, I would say that I came out of my experience at Roosevelt with some changes. In other cases, there were some things that I didn't change, but now at least I understand what somebody else is thinking, and so and that's really served me well, because I think that back when I was talking about my most proud moment, it was working together with other people, and you really can't effectively work well with others if you can't understand them, if you can't understand their life experiences, and you can't understand why they think and act and do the things that they do. And so, and in the policy world, why they want to achieve certain ends and why they want to use certain policy vehicles. And so I think that has been the most important thing that came from my work at Roosevelt. I mean, look, I learned the technical skills of econometrics, right? I learned how to build the models, how to do the math of being an economist, and that served me very well too, because I don't think I would have gotten achieved the kind of the levels of in government that I did without also having the technical competency. So I don't want to short sell that at all. It was incredibly important for me to learn those things at Roosevelt.
Yeah, and it sounds like from what you're saying is we absolutely need both. We need to understand the diversity of perspective. I love that framing, to be able to do what you did relative to the budget impasse and all of that. And yeah, absolutely the technical skills. Bradley, do you want me to repeat the question? I know you've been sort of on the move a little bit. Yeah, it's just sort of what is the role the university played in the pathways that you've chosen?
Absolutely. No, Robert Morris, that was the college I attended. They had the I Center, and the I Center was this innovation center where there was a lot of experiential learning. And so I'm a practical learner. It has to be real, and I have to work on something real to learn. If not, and it's a theory, it just doesn't work for me that way. It's just why I made all the mistakes I've made in life as well. But no, it's basically one of those things that this wonderful person, Deanna Lee, she runs it. She actually is now at Roosevelt, and she's helping put on all of this as well. But she made such a big impact in my life that I don't think she'll ever understand, because of the media and the marketing and understanding how businesses work and the need for that. Just polished off what I've learned up until that point. Her on top of Andre Boyle, those two professors, they just sat down with me for so many extra hours to discuss and teach and practically learn and allow me to lead and help others. And it was just a beautiful thing. And I got a live broadcast scholarship because of Deanna and all of these just different aspects that it was just all about the experiential learning, doing and not just practicing, that allowed me the most out of my college experience.
There's a theme there, Bradley, in terms of when you came back from the military and you were working in the bar, you were talking about the way you were inspired in the process of engaging in activism. And so there's that thread that's run through very clearly. Yeah.
It's all about mentors, right?
They matter for sure. Yeah. So I guess for both of you, you're sort of on this other end now where you are the mentors and are looking back on the people that have mentored you. Can you, each of you, and we'll reverse the order again, can you talk a little bit about how you thought about sort of what you were going to do with your life, how you were going to make your mark in the world when you were in college, and then think about where you are now and how has that changed and what caused that to change and how have you sort of thought about that now and how do you look back on how you've made your mark or are still making your mark?
That is a wonderful question.
And complicated.
It is, because defining how you're going to leave your mark is not something that you always get to choose. You can decide what path you want to take, but it's going to lead you somewhere else. And I think that that's an important piece is there's people that want to plan out the next 20 years of their life. This is what I'm going to do, and this is how I'm going to do it. And you can go down that very like linear path, but it's not as fulfilling as taking this opportunity that pops up in 6 months from now, or 1 year from now, or 5 years from now, or taking one opportunity and then struggling and straining it to make sure you take two. So I think making your mark should be nonlinear. It shouldn't be just this narrow pathway that you're going down. It's something that you have to decide for yourself. For me, how I leave my mark is how I treat my community and I work for my community every day. Did I have the words for that, even though those were so simple? I don't know, 5, 6 years ago? No, I didn't. I didn't have those, but I knew that I wanted to do something for my community. And I didn't know how to obtain it because there were so many barriers mentally that I had to break down. And it takes a lot of self-work. You have to work on yourself in order to do this work because I mean, I've messed up, there's things that I've done. And I say this because we need to have these kind of conversations. Like I was talking to this Hispanic gentleman a month ago and I asked him for taco recommendations. And why? I know this. I know that that's the stupidest thing you can ask because there's so much more food and culture within Latino, Latinx societies. And the reason why I bring this up with how you leave your mark is because sometimes you're going to mess up on that mark. It's going to get a little rusted or it's going to get a little damaged. But if you wake up the next day and realize what you did and work to fix it, that's a better way to leave your mark than to just be stubborn and stay down that narrow path because it's not always the best path to take.
Wonderful advice. I'm going to pass it to Hans now.
Thank you very much. Look, what Bradley said about the nonlinearity of the path is exactly correct. When I was a graduate student at Roosevelt, I think that if you'd asked me at the time how I thought I was going to make my mark, I would have said one of two ways. Either I'm going to write some interesting paper on the economics of taxation or tax policy, and at the time I was really interested in writing a paper on how effective tax increment financing is in state finance. I mean, that was what I had done some research on while I was there and was really interested in. But or perhaps I would run for public office one day and really leave my mark in the world. I have zero interest in either of those things now. So understand that life changes. I think that's very important. Interests change, conditions change. My biggest professional goal today is to help restore the public trust in government and to do that through providing transparency into government finance, ensuring that the state here in Alaska now is presenting honest and fair financial statements that are accurately representing what we do. Working on things like online checkbook to make sure that people can have a platform where the transactions are broke down in such a way that they can understand them and see where the state, the treasury is spending its money. Those kind of things are very important to me because it's important that people actually trust the government to do the right things when they're commissioned to do so. But beyond that too, and maybe it's because I'm starting to get a little older, and I see also leaving my mark through my kids. and raising them to be civically minded individuals who are engaged, that have and understand that there's a greater purpose than just themselves in this world. And I think that I'll have left my mark properly if they grow up to be good people.
Thank you. So the next question that I have for you both, and then I'm going to throw you a curveball, but I am going to sort of foreshadow for you that I'm throwing the curveball. I recognize in each of you some similar threads, and I'm imagining that you're recognizing some of that in one another. And so I'm going to give you an opportunity to ask each other a question. But first, I want to continue the discussion about leaving the mark. Our students that are in the university right now, and some of our younger alum and others, let's face it, society is in a bit of a transition right now. They're thinking about this idea about leaving a mark, and you've spoken to the non-linearity of it and all. What advice would you have for our students with our younger alum as they're trying to go out and find their way and create and make a mark in the world?
So I think I was up next. And this may seem like a strange response, but I would say, don't worry so much about it. Don't worry so much about making your mark, seriously. What I think you should do is find things that are interesting to you. Find things that are inspiring to you. Pursue work in those areas, and leaving a mark will eventually take care of itself if you're focusing on what's important, if you're focusing on your friends, your family, your community, and having that kind of just go beyond yourself. One thing that I sometimes get asked is, how do I square this kind of community view of the world with the rational self-interest model of market economics? And I actually don't think that's an incredibly difficult thing to do, because there's a difference between rational self-interest and selfishness. And I would just encourage people to see that they have to look beyond themselves, and no matter what their field of work is, and no matter what your political alignment is, it's easy to look beyond yourself. Look, in market economics, optimal outcomes are based on bilateral exchange with mutual benefit, right? And that both parties have to be better off as a result of the transaction. So we should always be looking beyond ourselves to make other people better off, and in the process, that makes us better off. And I think that that's really kind of the path toward making your mark, whether it's in public service, community organizing, entrepreneurship, wherever. It doesn't, because you can make your mark in business, you can make your mark in a community organization, you can make your mark, in government. There's lots of places to make your mark, and so don't box yourself in.
Wonderful.
Thanks for stealing that answer from me. No, honestly, just the other day I was at a gas station, and this cashier just had this brilliant smile and just really nice, and they gave me this amazing compliment that they just liked my energy. Leaving your mark could be as simple as making somebody else's day, and it can be as difficult as trying to pass a budget in the government. Leaving a mark is not a singularly defined as some huge goal, huge thing. You could become president and leave your mark, or you could become a council member and leave your mark. You can become a gas station attendant and leave your mark. It's just all about your attitude and your energy and what you put into the world, because if you keep on putting negativity into the world, you're going to leave the wrong mark. And so it's better to leave the right mark by having the best energy and putting your best foot forward each day, no matter how hard it gets, no matter how much goes on in life, no matter how many adversities you face. You just need to put in positive energy into the world, and that's the best way to leave your mark.
Wow, thank you both very much. So I do want to say, and Bradley, I'm going to turn to you first for whatever question you may have for Hans. But before doing that, I just want to note that it's interesting, all three of us began in community college. And Bradley, I started in the same community college as you. Yeah. So that's kind of neat. And that transition too from community college to the 4-year, it's also a unique process. Bradley, I'm going to turn it over to you. Anything, and it could be a statement to Hans or a question. Floor is yours.
Well, Hans, I think it's one of those things when we were going through like our dress rehearsal a week ago, like I understood what you did a little bit and I didn't. And then I realized after I was like this, just breaking down that information, like it was interesting because we were working towards change at the same time in Illinois. You said that you served under Pat Quinn and then went on over to Rauner. And I think it's a really interesting thing because that was around the time that I was involved in it. And we never met, we never seen each other, but we're both trying to do something to better advance society. And I think that was a really great lesson that I learned, because you have your activists, you have your advocates, you have your policy makers and decision makers and your government. And sometimes you feel like you're in this battle alone, but there's people all over that are working to try to make our cities better. So I just wanted to say I appreciate what you've worked towards accomplishing and have accomplished. So I guess that's more of a statement.
Well, thanks a lot, Brad. And I guess that sort of along those same lines, one of the things that's I think difficult when you're on the inside in government is that there are a lot of competing interests that are all hitting you simultaneously. For when I was the OMB director, there would be a steady stream of meetings every day with people coming to the table and making the case for why their program should be funded, why this infrastructure project should be done. It could be a university president coming with a request for funding for a new arts building or whatever. And you get these requests would just come in every 15 to 30 minutes for 9 hours straight, right? And so I always kind of felt that, man, and sometimes I'm receptive and sometimes I'm not, and sometimes my boss is receptive and sometimes he wasn't, and from your you're on the other side of that and coming in sometimes with either the requests or just to make the general case or whatever. But how is it that government could really work better with organizations like Big Brothers Big Sisters and or other community organizations? What are the things that we need to know, either as technocrats or bureaucrats like myself or the elected officials themselves? Like, what are the things that could be helpful for us to understand when working with organizations like yours?
Can you repeat that question one more time? I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. So, like, what from your perspective, and I'll phrase it a different way, but do you have any sense that when you walk into the offices of government that maybe folks don't understand your mission, what it is that you're trying to achieve, or that there's any kind of disconnect in communication? Like, how can we in government work better with outside organizations for the greater good? I guess that's the question.
That one's a tough question because a lot of it is about the systems that are created by government and how they impact our communities. So for me, I'm not I have a non-lobbying role. I do not speak directly to our government officials here in Oklahoma City. I really work on working with different organizations that uplift our message. So I really don't have a great answer for that one, because that's not the role that I specifically play. But a lot of the times it's so hard, because if you're having 15 hours of meetings in a day, how can you ever do research, right? One thing that wasn't brought up now, but it was brought up a couple weeks ago, is when you were talking about how you went around the city and you rode around on the buses, and you tried to learn about what the issues were and how much you accomplished then, because you knew it firsthand versus it being told to you, right? Because if I'm being told something for 5 hours, at some point, I'm gonna miss every other word. So I think that people who work within the government, they need to be servant leaders, and they need to get out into their communities more. And if that means taking that 2 hours a day to go to another organization and just drop by, you don't have to make it a scheduled meeting. If a state representative came into my office today, I'd be like, come on in, sit down, let's talk, or let's go for a walk down the street, or let's go to this neighborhood. I would just run around the city with them. I've done that with many people, where we just said, let's meet up and we'll drive around the city and just talk. Because sometimes just talking while you're looking at your city, you realize more intricacies than if we just sat in my office or your office and just talked to each other for hours or anything like that. So I think that most people just need to be that servant leader and get out into their communities. And that's probably the best way that I could answer that.
Yeah, I really feel that I agree with you. And that time when that I spent on those tours, going out to places like Ludeman and actually seeing the conditions of the facility, going out to Joliet Correctional Facility and at Stateville and looking at the conditions out there. I mean, those were very instructive to me as an OMB director. And I think that you're right. Inviting folks out to see what's actually happening on the ground in the community is probably the most effective way at communicating with policymakers. And I know that I want to turn it back over because I think we had some questions coming in from the outside.
Well, really quick, what was the tipping point or the reason why you decided to do that in the first place? Like, what drove you to that point?
Oh, great question. There was actually the person who's the chief of staff at the what did we call it at the Capital Development Board back in Illinois, said, hey, you've got to go out and see these places. You've got to go out and I'll schedule it for you. And I'm like, okay, sure. I knew deferred maintenance was a problem. It was so obvious because all I had to do was walk into the James R. Thompson Center in downtown Chicago to know that deferred maintenance was a problem. My office was a case study in deferred maintenance. And so I knew that it existed, but I didn't know the extent of it. I'd heard stories about, especially within our prison system. The prison system in Illinois was just in terrible condition, and I could go on and on about it. But then getting out and actually seeing it, and having that person say, "You need to do this," and so Jacqueline O'Day was her name. She was instrumental in inspiring me to go out and do that tour.
Thank you both for engaging in that discussion. I think it's so important because, again, it's highlighting that as we're thinking about the paths we're going to choose, that actually being in a space, experiencing it, engaging in action, everything that you've talked about to this point, learning from others, being self-aware, self-critical, taking responsibility, all of that comes together to bring us to these spaces where we can do social good in ways that are necessary at this point. We do have some questions from our audience, and so I'd like to, at this point, flip to that, unless either of you has any sort of final comment for one another. I don't want to end a discussion if you have. Otherwise, I'll flip right now to the questions.
We can flip.
Okay. All right. So the first question, What's the biggest challenge in your current field at this time?
May I go first? I think that it's there's competing pressures in the budget, right, for funding, and funding for the state's accounting system and for accounting in general is it's not an incredibly interesting topic. It's not well understood. It's a lot easier for policymakers to make the case for funding programs that are helpful to the community than it is to fund the central services that support the infrastructure of government. And so, but if we don't have strong financial reporting and a good accounting system, and we can't pay people, and all those sorts of things, well, all of the other good work can't properly happen, right? And so I think that the most difficult thing for me is to make that connection between providing the central services of government through accounting and the actual provision of services in the community and in the state of Alaska. Accounting is difficult, right? Especially, government accounting today is becoming increasingly complicated. The GASB comes out with new pronouncements every year. And next year, in the next year's annual report, we're going to have to implement, brand new lease accounting standards, right? And which completely change the way we've done lease accounting in the state. And so these things happen every year, and so staying on top of that, preparing the financial reports, keeping the ERP system, our state, payroll, accounting, and HRM system up to date it's a Herculean feat. It costs millions and millions of dollars. It's difficult for lawmakers to wrap their mind around why they need to invest that money. But those are very difficult. And then lastly, it's kind of moving government toward a future-minded workforce where we can use some of the great new technologies out there, like optical reading and robotic process automation, and integrating that into how we administer government so that we can, help contain cost against all these other competing priorities.
Bradley, you want to respond to the same question? Do you want me to repeat it, or do you have? Okay, so the question is, what's the biggest challenge in your field or your work at this time?
I think that this is something for everyone. I mean, the pandemic has really hurt mental health across the board. During this time, we've just seen so much increase in abuse from people who abuse everything from drugs and different aspects of life, and just they're not taking care of themselves because it's harder to during this pandemic when you're also socially isolated to the same people. And myself even, I've found myself lately creating arguments with my husband, sometimes out of boredom. I'm realizing it's out of boredom. At that point, I think it's a real issue, and then it's not. I think that was something that I realized is that I need to start taking my mental health more seriously, so that way I can better serve my community and my family, my friends. And so the biggest struggle right now is mental health. I think that that's an important thing to advocate for anyone to really keep on moving forward. Is that you need to take care of yourself, and you need to advocate for yourself sometimes. And sometimes that's realizing I need to take a whole day to just sleep. And I did. I was on vacation last week, so took a whole day where I just disconnected from everything. I turned off every electronic, and I slept, and it was the best day because I realized what I was doing, because I was going so hard and trying to serve this community so much that I wasn't taking care of myself. And I had to remind myself, because I was new into this role. I'm hitting my year mark right now. And I mean, I grinded. I've had over 1,000 one-on-one conversations in 1 year with donors, mentors, littles, parents, community members. Been doing reuniting stories of like our bigs and littles from 20, 30 years ago, and learning about these stories and where they're at now. And what I realized is like, sometimes you just need to stop and take that beat so that way you can get back on track. And that's what I'm glad I was able to accomplish last week, because I'm coming mentally more prepared for this conversation tomorrow, flying back to Chicago for the Alumni Awards. And it's just important to advocate for your own mental health and take care of yourself so you can actually take care of others. And my husband and I, luckily, we have great communication. And so we've, again, silly arguments are not anything that was but that's it.
Yeah, it's interesting, Bradley, because so much of your professional, what you're doing in the community is around ACEs, so the adverse childhood experiences, and that's that mental health stuff. And you're right, so often, even as we're working in mental health issues, we're so busy looking outward that we don't bring ourselves into it. So that's some important advice. We need to wrap this up. I cannot believe that we're already toward the end of an hour. So before we move to closing today, I just want to give you each an opportunity for any concluding thoughts, advice you have for students now, for others, anything you want the world to know. And Bradley, we're going to start with you.
Well, take care of yourself. Take that next opportunity that comes to you. That, not all opportunities are good, but take the next right opportunity for you. Don't scare yourself out of it. I used to do that a lot. But there was this perfect opportunity for me, and I thought I wasn't good enough. I did that with this role. For 4 days, I looked at this application and I said, no, I'm not good enough. I told me all the reasons why. And then I started to tell myself the reasons why I was right for this role. And I realized there's far more of those than the handful of reasons why I shouldn't apply. So stop talking down to yourself. You are worth it. You are worthy. You can do better. And even if you're the meanest person in the world, you can change that. You decide to wake up and be who you want to be every day. And sometimes that takes help by asking for help, or, getting that therapist, that counselor, going to the doctor and seeing if there's maybe something that's imbalanced, and if you don't have the privilege of going to a doctor, you can always reach out to me and I'll try to find you resources, no matter where you're at in the United States or the world. There's a wonderful thing called www.google.com and I will Google it until I have to make phone calls, and I'll make phone calls for you. But I'll advocate for you if you're having trouble doing that for yourself as well.
Wonderful. Thanks, Bradley. Try to beat that, Hans.
Yeah, I know, right?
I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Thanks. Look, I think that Bradley's onto something with taking the next opportunity, but I'll frame it a little differently. I'll say, seek a little adventure. One of the things I could have made a safe play a couple of years ago and stayed in Illinois, and taken a different role within the Pritzker administration. But this opportunity to move to Alaska came up, and I thought, what am I going to ask myself 20 years from now? What am I going to be thinking if I don't pursue this? And yeah, it meant uprooting my family from the south suburbs and moving 3,000 miles across the country. But I would never, ever go back on it. It's been an absolutely fantastic experience. It's my family has adapted well to the new lifestyle in Alaska, and it's so completely different from the way we lived in the Homewood Flossmoor area in the south suburbs, but we love it. And so I would encourage people to have that sense of adventure, number one. And number two, and this is something I've said in the past, and I think I said this a year ago at the awards, is find people that you don't agree with to be your friend. and learn how to talk with them and have a good relationship with those people and have civil conversations about important things, not just going to talk about the Notre Dame Wisconsin football game at Soldier Field. I'm saying people that you can have serious discussions with. Going back to the people that I had admired from years ago, one of those people was William F. Buckley Jr. and he had a show called Firing Line on PBS, and he would bring in Daniel Patrick Moynihan onto the show, and they could have competing perspectives and have a very civil discussion about important political issues, and it was good and it was productive. And it's something that doesn't often exist today, and I would hope that the world can start to move back that direction toward these conversations that aren't just bashing each other with ideology. And so I hope that if I can encourage young folks today on anything, it's in that area.
Thank you. So thank you so much. And thank you to the audience for joining us today. There's so much to talk about, and how great it would be to have these conversations on a regular basis. Just to hear the two of you having the interchange, wonderful. So for those that are joining us through whatever platform you're joining us, if you want more information about Han Zigmund or Bradley Krouac, you can get this information on a URL that I think is going to be put up for you. If not, you can find it. There it is, put down, scrolling on the bottom there. And you can find this through our Roosevelt webpage as well. We'd also like to invite you to a couple of upcoming events. On October 7th at noon, Chicago time, which is Central Time, we're going to have a panel that features our honors program, and you can register through the Roosevelt website. And then please mark your calendars. November 1st to November 4th is our American Dream Reconsidered conference, and that's going to bring together all kinds of wonderful panelists and discussions, and including the Mansfield lecture. And we're welcoming Bethany Morrow, who's going to be talking about Take the Mic, people finding their voice, and in that process finding how they're going to make their mark in the world. So we encourage you to come back and join us, and we hope you have a great rest of the day. Thanks again, Hans and Bradley. This was amazing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us.